I was an amateur for 10 years and I had never planned on being a professional. I say all the time, if you would have told me at 18, 25, even 27 that I was going to be a professional photographer, I would have not believed you. I had no intention of this career at all. I just told my boss I wanted to quit. I felt like I needed to leave my job, and I decided I was going to be a professional photographer. There was no business plan. I had a website because I was a website project manager. I had a business checking account because my dad was an accountant. But no business plan, no mentor, no training. I had never been photographed in a studio. I had never even been in a professional studio. I had a used camera from eBay, and I had a love for the craft. And I remember crying that weekend because I had been working for 10 straight years and putting myself through school and hustling and doing the corporate ladder. And for some reason at that moment in time, I left it all behind.
I worked for McDonald's and paid my graphic designing fees. So I joined as a crew.
Okay.
And then got promoted as a hostess. And McDonald's really molded me and, gave me that foresight and, following standards, following systems. So then we were in the LSM department. And I think that really gave me the confidence of, talking to people, the customer care, and, that gave me a little idea about brand and all because, we were trained in certain way. I'm trained by Germans, Americans, Australians, and like made in India. I also used to, art direct corporate films and things like that. And we used to go for offsites, and my boss was very fond of taking us to exotic places, and I used to be the camera person, and I used to love taking portraits and solos and all. So at work, when we used to download the folders, like everybody needed Falguni's folder. In the whole process, I'm a graphic designer by profession.
Hello and welcome to Buck Studio and a Brandt. Welcome to our studio, and it is not even numero uno. It is the second time that you're here
Yes.
to our wonderful studio, and you've just finished your workshop.
Yes.
How has it been for you?
Well, India is always very welcoming. We actually told the hotel this morning that out of the 46 countries I've been to, they had the best customer service we had ever seen ever in the world. And they were super proud. Like, when are you coming back, to this hotel? And it's true. It's true because we didn't like I didn't like the chicken. I am not kidding. They called the room maybe 5 times, and then in the morning they were apologizing, and then we had a gift, and we just kept telling them it's okay. And during breakfast they came like 3 times to make sure it was okay. They sent us home with these macaroons. And I was like, wow, I have been all over the world, and India gets A+++ for hospitality. Falguni has been so hospitable since the day I've met her. And so I do notice this country is as overwhelming as it is with the number of people. I will not lie. When I first came here, I was like, no, too many people. But very respectful and very hospitable, and I admire them.
Thank you so much for that because, yes, we always find and we always say so, Atiti Devo Bhava, and that's how it is. In English, we mean that a guest who comes to our country is as good as a god-like person for us. So that hospitality for how you honor a god is going to be in that manner. Always. It has to be A-class. It has to be full of warmth. It has to be full of love. Now, that's how you look at your God. That's how you look at your higher we.
Sure.
Right? So that's the way we are. So thank you.
The box, that's very impressive because I don't really know many cultures that are like that. The US could learn a thing or two.
Let me add that. So when I met her first, so you know how we honor our guru. So she had no clue of what I was doing. So I anyways asked, can I do something to the person who had organized? And I touch her feet and then we put the shawl. And she's like, no one has ever touched my feet. And year after year we have done. She found it very overwhelming, but then I explained her the meaning of what it means when we touch feet.
And this is part of our way of honoring the Guru.
Yes, I think that's amazing.
So, Falguni, welcome. It's because of you that we have her here, and the Indian photography industry is getting to understand what it is to make it A class. So, yes, welcoming both of you. Anna, I would like to begin with you to understand from you. Give me a gist about your story in your own words. You can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Goodness. I always hesitate when someone asks me this question. I'm like, do I give the short version, the long version?
You give your version from your heart. I can prompt. I have all the pointers.
You know, I was an amateur for 10 years and I had never planned on being a professional.
Okay.
I say all the time, if you would have told me at 18, 25, even 27 that I was going to be a professional photographer, I would have not believed you. I had no intention of this career at all. I was an amateur photographer since I was a teen. I'm adopted, and I say that one of the driving forces of my photography is, of course, my adoption story. I didn't go into the home with family photos. I entered their home with nothing but the clothes on my back. And so I struggled for years with just self-identity, understanding who I was as a Puerto Rican woman being raised in a mixed household and not knowing that much of my biological family. And it was very difficult because what I learned growing up is if you don't have a visual memory or a visual representation of where you've come from or your family's come from, it's hard to know where you're going.
Yeah, totally.
And I think people don't understand that. And it was difficult. And I think what saved me is the parents that adopted me. My mother, I recently lost my mother and my father, and I will always speak very highly of them because they are the reason I'm here today. But my mother had 2 master's degrees, one in psychology and one in divinity. Those are very interesting degrees. In her craft, she was known as a biblical scholar. She did become an ordained minister, which at the time, mind you, she passed 3 years ago at 88. So go back even further, 40 years ago, women weren't becoming ordained ministers. They also, white women weren't marrying Latin men 60 years ago. She was Norwegian. My dad was from Argentina.
Okay.
Norwegians weren't adopting brown children. So she broke a lot of stereotypes. And she was the type of woman that when all 5 of us were behind her and people would ask her, are these all your children? She would look them dead in the eye and say, yes.
That confidence.
That confident. And, it was a very strict upbringing, very strict, and a lot of rules. But she was always very consistent in her message that she loved me. So regardless of my behavior, what I did or didn't do, even if I was in trouble, she would just say, I love you. And I remember, years later, when my kids were driving me crazy, I was like, how did you raise 5 children and not murder them? Mom, murder us. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, my children's successes and failures were not mine. Meaning, if we were naughty, that wasn't her being naughty, that was us being naughty. And if we were successful, that wasn't her success, that was ours. Her job was to raise us regardless. So when my kids would misbehave or I would just look at them like, oh my gosh, I would have to take a breath like, okay, that was their decision. How do I guide them? And, every day she's my motivating factor. And the photography, I wish I had an answer. I was interviewed by a podcast company in Australia years ago, and they were like, how did this happen? And I'm like, I wish I knew. All I can tell you is I was an amateur. I was doing my thing, working, going to school, loving photography. At 29 years of age, I moved from New York to California. No. Yes, New York to I always reverse that. New York to California to get married. Had not lived with him before, so 2 moving trucks brought us to California. And then went and got married in Arizona, and then went to Mexico for a honeymoon. And that was the first time I had ever even left the country.
Oh, really?
So the fact that I've been to 46 countries, I don't even know how that happened. And I was working, doing my job, and one day, through a conversation, I just told my boss I wanted to quit. I wish I knew exactly why, except to tell you that at that moment in time, I felt like I needed to leave my job, and I decided I was going to be a professional photographer. There was no business plan. I had a website because I was a website project manager. I had a business checking account because my dad was an accountant, and he always said, write everything off, whatever you're doing. But no business plan, no mentor, no training. I had never been photographed in a studio. I had never even been in a professional studio. I had a used camera from eBay, and I had a love for the craft. And I remember crying that weekend because I had been working for 10 straight years and putting myself through school and hustling and doing the corporate ladder. And for some reason, at that moment in time, I left it all behind.
And that decision is so tough. But
yes,
you took it.
Within minutes of me saying to my boss, I wanted to talk to you. And that was it. And he just looked at me like, why are you leaving? Why are you quitting? What do you mean? And I just left.
So he's trying to process, and here you are already decided that, okay, I need to move on.
At that moment, I was going to work at home that weekend because I was shooting child models on the side. And because I was a web designer and project manager, I had a corporate client in Newport, and my model client was in Newport. So it was like both worlds were colliding at the same time. And I just made a comment like, I'm going to work at home that weekend. And he was like, no, you can't do that. We need to see you or something. And I was like, you don't need to see me. I'm contract. I can work at home. It's just one of those conversations. Well, let's talk about it, Anna. Let's go up to the conference room. And I remember just getting up to the conference room and going, I think I'd like to leave. And he was like, wait, what? No, you can work at home. Like, what? He just didn't understand because it wasn't a fight. It wasn't an argument. It was just this moment. And from that moment on, just step by step.
You've not looked back.
Not once.
Anytime now while you're narrating the story, does it come to your head that decision changed the trajectory for your life completely?
100%. When I was doing that podcast with this Australian team, she said, oh, you were at Saturn Return. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? And I later Googled Saturn, what is Saturn Return? That there's several points in someone's life where the planets align, something about your birth. I don't even know. I'd have to Google it again. And she had said that at one of those times is around 29 or 30. And she said everybody will experience this at different times in their life.
Okay.
Sometimes it's 50, 60, you see people getting divorced later in life. Or it's when something happens in your life that has to do with this amazing world we live in. And you are at a point where you need to make a decision. And what's interesting about this podcaster is she tells me everybody feels it at some point, but very few people listen to the call.
Yeah. And then take an action.
Correct. And that's all I can explain. And, even my siblings, when I'm the youngest of 5 in my adopted family, they still sometimes look at me and they're just like, we don't even know who this person is sometimes, because I was the young one. I wouldn't go eat at a place by myself. I was always behind 4 siblings. I wouldn't travel the world by myself. I'm very introverted, very quiet. I'm not social by any means at all. My sister is a social butterfly. She talks to the whole town. She's very extroverted. I'm very introverted. And so if you talk to my family, they're like, Anna's in her room. Anna's by herself. Anna's reading. I was the quietest one and still am at the table. And so they sometimes look at me like, we don't know how this happened. And all I can say is I try to listen to the voices that guide me, and I just go.
And now they'll be surprised to see her podcast, where she is sharing her life with us. And they'll be feeling that, oh my God, there are so many layers to this woman that we know as our family person.
No, it's, when my mom passed, I went up to speak, and I was the last one to speak, and I was barely standing because I was just distraught, barely sobbing and trying. And I remember when I was done looking around, and all my siblings are crying, and